Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Finding Starlight, the Quimby Grove Series Book 1 by Shannon and Nikole, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. Ellawyn. 6 months ago. I tiptoed toward my side of the bed and crouched down, lifting the side of the comforter that hung down over the mattress and carefully placing it on top of the bed. Holding my breath, desperate not to make any noise, I used my fingernails to pry up a piece of the floorboard. My heartbeat radiated in my chest, beating faster and faster, ticking like a bomb ready to detonate at any given moment. And there'd be no one to sort through the wreckage if that happened. I pulled on the floorboard with all my might, wiggling it until it finally gave way. I slumped back into the floor, gripping the piece of wood into my chest, and let out the breath I'd been holding. I carefully placed the floorboard next to me and shifted so I could reach inside the small space. It only took a few seconds to find the envelope I'd kept hidden there for over a year. My secret hiding spot hadn't been discovered. The corners of my mouth tipped up as relief coursed through my veins, though I'd have known if it were. I opened the envelope, checking the contents inside as I heard a truck pull into the driveway. I abruptly sat up as the sound of a door being slammed radiated throughout the house. Tick, tick, tick. Panic laced my movements as I rushed to untie the laces of my right boot. I yanked it off as fast as I could while I listened to the heavy footsteps come up the steps. He was early today. This could ruin everything. I grabbed the floorboard that I'd removed and ducked my head underneath the bed, placing it down as softly as I could. I jumped up and pushed the comforter back down where it belonged before sitting on the edge of the bed. After shoving the envelope inside my boot, I quickly placed my foot back inside, concealing my secret. Just as the doorknob turned, I bent over and started tying the laces of my boots, hoping my heartbeat wasn't as loud as I thought. I didn't turn when I heard him enter the room or when his footsteps thudded across the old wooden floor. It wasn't until he was directly in front of me that he addressed me. "What are you doing?" he barked. I swallowed, trying to remain calm as I finished tying my boot. When I met his gaze, the anger was palpable. His eyes narrowed in a heated glare. I cleared my throat. I was just cleaning up here and about to start lunch. I placed my hands on the edge of the bed before getting the courage to stand. His nostrils flared before he shoved my shoulders, pushing me back down onto the bed. The pain from the contact pulsed through my shoulder blades as I tried to move. I closed my eyes, grateful to have landed on a soft bed. This time. "You should have had lunch done by the time I got home," he shouted. I winced, glancing at the clock on my nightstand and noting the time. "You're home 2 hours earlier than normal. I couldn't have known." He took a few steps back and crossed his arms over his chest as his lips curled in disgust. "Sounds like some bullshit excuse to me, Ellawyn." He started for the door and turned. "You don't fucking work. You could have called to see when I'd be home." I had to bite my tongue to keep from reminding him that I didn't have a job because he wouldn't let me. He didn't trust me enough. I pushed myself up to a seated position and rubbed my shoulders one at a time. I didn't feel like arguing with him this time. I simply nodded and kept my gaze on the wall in front of me. "I'll be down in a minute, Joshua." "Don't bother. I'm going back to work. See if you can manage getting to the grocery store on time this afternoon." The door slammed closed, and my body shook at the intensity. A strangled breath escaped my lungs as I wrapped my arms around myself. Even my own touch was comforting, a reminder that I hadn't had a hug in so long. I listened as his footsteps thundered down the steps. It wasn't until I heard the car door slam shut that I sprang into action. I went to my closet and pulled out my favorite coat that my mother had given me, along with a beanie and gloves. I tossed the garments on the bed before I walked to the nightstand and removed the drawer from the track. The contents dropped to the bed with a light thud as I dumped the drawer and took in what had fallen out. My birth certificate, social security card, phone chargers, hair ties, and other useless junk. I plucked up the social security card and birth certificate and placed them into the small section of my purse. Grabbed my wallet next and pulled out my bank and credit cards, then placed them into the bottom of the drawer underneath all the useless items. The cards were useless to me. He monitored everything I purchased. Every penny spent, he questioned. He knew how much groceries ran weekly, and if I spent over the typical amount, he'd pounce on me, demanding the receipt. There had been no trust in even the minuscule things. Lastly, I took my cell phone off the charger, powered it down, and placed it into the drawer. The cell phone didn't hold any amount of power either. It had been a monitoring device that tracked my location at all times. The phone calls and texts had all been checked daily. The only contact in my phone was him. I'd had no escape. I'd become a prisoner in my own life. I took one last look around the bedroom I shared with Joshua. The walls were painted bright white, and everything else in the room matched. There wasn't anything warm about the space, no colorful, cozy blankets or throw pillows, just white everywhere. And white showed everything, flaws and mistakes, my flaws and mistakes. The room was as cold as a prison, and Joshua as rough as a hardened criminal in a shared jail cell. An escape was imminent. I'd been planning my own disappearance for over a year. I'd found the perfect small town tucked away in Pennsylvania to start over in. After today, Moon Harbor, Maine would be a distant memory. And I'd become a ghost, haunted by my past.